about a lot of things over the course of these videos, but today we're going to focus on the publishing world and how and why we ended up going independent.
We are, and I'm trying out apparently this cool new filter called Minecraft, also known as What's Wrong with My Computer, but we're going to make it through today. So I guess the first question or thought is that people ask is, did you always want to go indie? And the answer for us is no. We had every intention of going traditional. That's where we focused our time. In fact, we were kind of even snotty about it, not even paying attention when people talked about independent publishing at the beginning.
We were very focused on traditional publishing and did some looking down our noses about some things about indie publishing, and have since seen the error of those ways. It's never good to be looking down your nose at anything when you just don't know. We just didn't know anything. There's still a lot we don't know. But so what happened was, with traditional publishing, we did all the things we were told you were supposed to do. We had a really great developmental editor. We really reworked and rewrote and just honed the production values manuscript until it was the best that it could possibly be, in our view. And then we set about on the search for an agent, querying. I think any author, if you say that word querying, like there's a shiver of fear that comes up. First of all, writing a query is not easy. I will say that probably one of the reasons that we didn't do well with querying is that our query probably wasn't great or wasn't truly representative of what production values is. It's really hard to write a good query. But we did have target lists of agents who had already published some things that we felt fit well with production values, thematically or stylistically. We did all of that research, and then we sent off our query letters with whether it was the first chapter, or the first 5,000 words, or the first 10 pages, or just the query, whatever somebody's rules were about querying, we did that. And then it was just radio silence.
It was, and it was a glorious time suck away from everything else. Because it takes time to create those query letters. You have to personalize them. You have to look at all of their little nitpicky details, and I'm sure there's more reason for those than I understand. But every single step of it required time, and as people who work full-time, and then I have a family, we were spending all this time querying and not even certain what the result was going to be.
And then we weren't having time to be creative. I think that was part of one of our frustrations, is that suddenly we were stuck in this cycle of trying to be authors, but not on the creative side of it. And so that was disheartening, because when we had time to work on author things, it was this it was querying. It wasn't writing something new, creating something, a new character or the next book or any of that. So that was one of the frustrations. Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the sitting and waiting in the radio silence was excruciating.
Well, and on my end, it's such a zero-sum game in that you're not getting any feedback. So I didn't know what to adjust the query to. I didn't know what was working in the letter and what wasn't. And with no feedback to go on, it was honestly just, for my own mixed metaphor, shooting dead fish in a barrel. There was no possible way to get dinner. I couldn't figure out I didn't have enough insider information to figure out how we could adjust it or even be successful, because I didn't know what worked and what didn't.
Absolutely, because most agents don't actually respond to queries. If it's a no, we were lucky. I think a couple of the people we queried, we got a nice, "Hey, I don't think you're quite the right fit for me, but good luck," kind of a. But again, no feedback. Not that there's an onus on them to give us feedback on our query, but because there isn't that onus, and we had taken the query to critique groups. And we'd done a couple of the Twitter contests, with really condensed, queries or pitches. And so we didn't know what needed to be changed to make an agent sit up and really look at production values.
Yeah. So we got about halfway through that process, and it just started feeling really inauthentic. And in addition, we realized we were losing the timeliness of our story.
Yeah. So, because if you've read production values, you know that it is incredibly timely for things that are going on in Hollywood right now, and that it's about current events, and it's about what the culture is right now. And the idea of waiting another year to get an agent, and then who knows how long after that to get actually published. And because once you get an agent, they have to go find you a publisher, and then you have to wait to get onto that publisher's schedule, which is probably a year out. So we were looking at 2 years at least if we got an agent.
Yeah. And so in the end, we kind of ended up looking at our story and realizing that even if we got lucky enough for someone to say, "Yes, you are what we're looking for," our book would be irrelevant by the time people actually read it. And so then we started to say, well, why not go indie? But that has its drawbacks as well.
Yes. And mostly, and I think the tipping point for me in the decision to go indie was, we want this book out there. We don't want it just to sit in a drawer for X number of years, because there are so many stories about so and so got their first book published after 10 years. Like, this was finished and then it took them 10 years to get it published. No. One, we're not that young. Two, just I'm not that patient. So that for me was the tipping point, was no, I don't want just to let this sit. I want it to get out there. Let's just do it. So
well, I did read this funny statistic once that said that most books are written somewhere between 20 to 30 years in the past, that's more common. And I sat there looking at it and saying, well, maybe not for the author. Maybe it's the book they actually wrote 30 years ago that's finally finding its way to publication. Like, it's not really attempting to be retro. It just simply hasn't been published for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah. And then, we faced some of those drawbacks of indie publishing, but there's also been some really big benefits. And so I don't know, what do you think are the biggest benefits of indie?
The biggest benefit definitely is creative control. One of the concerns that we had about production values was that even if we get it to an agent and to a traditional publishing house, are they going to make us change B? Mm-hmm. Are they going to say, nope, we can't have a Mormon character? And we certainly saw that as a real possibility. So guess what? B is Mormon, and she stayed Mormon because we have the creative control.
Well, yeah, and I think Offscript would definitely have been a hard sell. If we went traditional, if you've read that, it's even more about B and about some of her struggles, and those would have been really hard to get pushed through New York publication houses, where they just don't necessarily want that kind of niche. And especially something that has slight stereotypes against it. I won't say slight, but it's something that is difficult. It's a difficult sell to have someone who is what do I want to say, but a relatable, I guess, nice character who has a label that is currently not labeled that way by society.
Yeah.
So that certainly came up. I think we also liked being a little bit in control of our title and our cover.
Yes. Yes. So all of those creative aspects, we were happy to say, yes, this is the title of the book, and this is what we want the cover to look like. And we worked with a great cover artist, Victorine, and that's been one of the other big upsides, I think, is the people that we've worked with to help us get these books completed. The people who designed the cover, who formatted it for print and for ebook. And so there's been a greater sense of connectedness to the writing community than maybe there would have been if we had managed to stay up on our high horse about traditional publishing.
Yeah, well, certainly think we've made some great friends. There's Cassie May, who runs Cookie Lynn Publishing, and Jolene Perry, who has been our editor on Offscript. And then, oh no, I forgot Catherine's last name. Our first editor.
Watson. Catherine Watson.
Yeah, who is the editor for Production Values. And these people have really helped us in a lot of different ways and to understand what we're doing. Now, I would say the biggest downside, however, is marketing. Oh my goodness, what a beast is marketing.
We hate marketing. And anybody who knows me in real life will laugh and laugh and laugh at this because I work in the world of marketing. That doesn't mean that I create marketing. It just means that that's where I work. And I hate it. I feel like I'm really bad at it. I don't know how anybody could handle these many, like reading this many tweets from any single person about how great something they've done is.
It's pretty exhausting to be this proud of yourself all the time.
It really is.
And it's hard to, again, it becomes that same thing with querying, where you send these things out and you have no idea in many ways what works and what doesn't. You're like, oh, this is like the best meme we've ever created. And no.
Or this service is going to be so great because other people say it's great, or it looks like it, and then zero results. So a lot of it's been just shooting darts in the dark, trying to figure out what works in terms of marketing, what services are actually worth our like limited funds, and how much do we have to do ourselves, and are we capable of doing it ourselves?
I'm playing some of those nasty games of like, we had a free event for Production Values because people had said you have to do this, and you give away a ton of books for free, and we haven't had a single review back. So you ask yourself, like, did anyone even read it? Did it really go into people's hands, or just all of China have it and are busy copying it? What actually happened to all these free copies that went out?
Yeah. So, well, which ebook? It was free ebook downloads. Like, we didn't mail out free paperbacks. Goodness no. Because those have a hard cost to them. But yeah, like it was really cool to be like, wow, look at how many people have downloaded Production Values for free. And then it turned into, well, then what happened?
Yeah. And it's really hard. And both of us have had the experience of people, coming to us and saying, oh my gosh, your book was so great, but then no one reviews it, or it doesn't sell. And you just keep asking these hard questions of how in the world do people do this? Because we know the product's good. So I think marketing is just a huge downside to the indie world. I don't think it would stop us necessarily, but it's something to think about.
No, it's not stopping us now. We certainly we're continuing. We feel like we learned things with Offscript, did things better there than we did with production values. We're headed into working on the next book and thinking about how we're going to market that. But it is really hard because it feels like the least creative thing that we do. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to feel like you're any good at it. Like, results are very hard to measure from the kind of marketing that we can afford, and that is traditionally accepted for books. Like, we can't send $500 off to whoever, I won't name names, to give us a big official real publisher review. We don't have that money. So that's the other thing, the balancing act of, okay, how much money do we have to play with? And, you know, what do we do with the money that we do get from sales? And how do we balance all of that out? The fact that it's cost this much to publish 2 books. Yeah. I have a pretty good idea of how much it'll cost to publish the next book. There's that, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it made taxes nice this year. That's all I can say. I never posted such a beautiful business loss. So it's
but that's like not the goal, you know. But it's part of the process, and like I said, I think the Offscript sales are already at a better point than, like, I think Offscript is like caught up to production values almost, at least in digital. You know, the print release just happened, so I anticipate that will sell as many print copies of Offscript as we did production values, even more. But yeah, the marketing, it's not fun. Now, if you are somebody who is really, really good at marketing and really good at making other people do things.
It's that making other people do things thing.
If you're really good at making other people do things, if you are a natural salesperson, maybe being an indie author is for you. Because you would just rock that side of it. I think that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. Yeah, and I definitely have some friends. I interviewed Laura Beers on here, and boy, that woman can market like no other. I wish I had her juice, but even when I do what she says, it doesn't quite work the same. So understanding it sells is definitely a bit of a gift. So be kind and gentle to yourself if you're doing all things right, and it's still kind of an uphill battle for you. So, I mean, I think we've kind of covered the things we wanted to. Is there anything else about the indie versus traditional?
You know, I would say the other upside has been relationships with bookstores.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The Printed Garden in Sandy is like our favorite place ever.
And he's the owner of the Printed Garden, has been so wonderful to work with and so welcoming. And the release party that we had for Offscript there on Saturday went so well. And so building those relationships and actually seeing the people who are buying your book, I think that there's that tangible visual like thing. Here's somebody who has bought my book and I can look them in the face and they, you know, tell me that they really enjoyed it. Unless you're a big time author going on tour, I don't know that you get that. But with the indie author thing, where you're schlepping it yourself and you're doing events at your local indie bookstores, you get that.
Well, and the other thing is that those indie bookstores, they work together a lot, and they really work with libraries quite a bit. And so we've been able to get into events that have given us a lot more respectability. We definitely are kind of moving more in with the I guess, artistic crowd than we do with the, like, here's my billionaire romance sells crowd. But he's gotten us into a lot of those by recommending us and recommending the book. So it really is a very grassroots method, but it also has been a very beneficial and lovely relationship that has helped both of us grow, because we bring people into his store. He had a great day on Saturday too, he said. And then, you know, at the same time, he helps us then to get into a new location or a new event. So definitely making friends with your local librarians and your local bookstores is vital to the indie process.
Yes, definitely. I think, yeah, I think that's about it, really. You know, if you're going to be determined to go traditional, and if you're going to stick with that, you just have to understand what the rules of that are, which is that you're not going to hear back from most people that you're, you know, querying. It's just that's the rule of agent etiquette at the moment. And it can be frustrating. It can be very much like a vacuum. But if you have the determination and the patience to walk through that time, and get all of those non-responses that are actually no's, then go ahead and do that. That just wasn't the thing that ended up being right for us.
I think the other thing you do have to consider is that balance of your time and your money. So, I mean, the average, even traditionally published author is going to make about $10,000 per book. And indie authors are only slightly less than that. I'm not really sure who those people are at the moment, but I have faith. But you do have to think about that time. It also is an average of 3 years before you really get an agent or a book deal. So looking at that time too, like, does this book have 3 years? Do I have the time to invest to do all of this for the next 3 years? I think that has to be a big piece of your consideration of what's going to happen over these next 3 years. Is it going to change the reception of my book? Because we do live in times that change quickly. You know, who knows where 3 years are going to take us from now. If you have a book that you're like, no, it's going to age really well, I have the time, I would like the faster path to that $10,000. We're on the trickle path with indie publication. So I think at that point, then it makes a lot of sense to go traditional. But if there are things that limit your time and your ability to wait, or that would make your book irrelevant, then you're probably smarter to hop on the indie train.
Because it is really easy to hit publish yourself. Amazon and CreateSpace make that very easy. The only advice I would offer is that you still take the time and do the things, all of the editing and rewriting and all of that. That you need to go through this many drafts of a book before it really is publishable. Still do all of that so that you're putting out your absolute best quality, because it's, especially if you've put it into print, it's in print and it's there forever.
Well, and I also want to caution people against thinking you have to be either one or the other, because I have a book that I'm pushing the traditional route at the same time that we're indie publishing these books. So I think you can toggle back and forth. Now, I will say, going traditional, that so far most of the response has been, hey, why don't you rewrite this and get an editor and then come back to us? So don't think you're going to be able to bypass the expenses. Like, oh, I won't have to pay for the expensive editor. No, I'm still paying for developmental editing and copy editing and all of those pieces to make sure it's a great product. And then I have somebody saying, no, go back and try again. So it's never simple, no matter how well received it is. You know, I was pretty lucky to be in consideration at most of the places that I queried with the traditional book, but it's still not out there, and it's still probably a good 2 years away, even if I do hit on the magic formula to make them publish it.
Yeah. So, I mean, working to be an author, you do have to invest not just your time, but your own money as well before you even get to any of the gates.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an expensive group of sellers before those gates. Be prepared.
Yes.
I mean, that shouldn't discourage you. Just be aware that you are not going to have gold fall from your pen. We were pretty good writers. And even then, both books, we've ended up with some huge fatal flaw in it that sent us right back to the drawing board within months of publication.
Yeah.
And that just happens. You need your editor to look at it and say, oh, my darlings, you just got lost in your own forest, didn't you?
Yes. And thank goodness for editors. Because then you can publish a book that is the best book that it could be, because you had somebody tear it apart for you so that you could put it back together the right way.
Yes, there's tears, there's shouting, there's all sorts of ugly things when it happens, but you really need to be able to listen, step away from it, take that advice, and then slowly, tear your own heart to pieces and rebuild it from scratch.
Yes. And it's worth it. It is really worth it. I mean, both of the books, it was really, really painful to go through that process. But absolutely 100% made the books better, made us better writers, and makes it so that I can still look at production values. And now I'm looking at Offscript in print in front of me, and I'm just proud. I just love these books, love what we've done. And I don't ever want to lose that. So I wouldn't ever want to lose any part of that process.
Oh, I agree. And I always get to this point, and I did it with Offscript, and I say, oh, this is exactly the book that I want. I don't want to make a single change. And then the editor comes back with, oh boy, did you see what happened right there around the 2/3 mark? That was not okay.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but it was the book I wanted. And then I get through the whole thing and I'm like, oh, wait, the book I actually wanted was hiding inside the book I thought I wanted.
Yeah.
So you do have to respect that. And if you're an indie, your editor is even more important, because there is nobody else that's going to check and balance you. You have to be the person who knows your own end game. And so that editor is vitally important. Plus, crappy mistakes are going to be something that they're going to catch more if they know you're an indie, that they're not going to forgive the author like they will, with the 13 mistakes that still exist in Harry Potter.
Yeah, and unfortunately, indie authors, indie publishing has a reputation for being kind of fast and sloppy. There are so many indie authors that aren't sloppy, that are putting out quality work. So I think that was when we made the decision to go indie, we're still going to do everything to make the best quality product. And not everyone who indie publishes is going to do that. There's always going to be those people who I don't want to speculate on as to reasons why, but who kind of churn and burn, write a book in 2 or 3 months and then hit publish, do it with the next one, keep going. And that just doesn't work for us and wouldn't be satisfying to us.
Yeah, no. So I think you do have to pick and choose a little carefully with indie, but certainly don't be afraid of it, because I've read some really fantastic stories that would never see light of day in mainstream publication, especially about niche markets, diverse markets, really kind of unusual storytelling methods. Those aren't going to be really popular among traditional publications, and yet they are really powerful stories. So I definitely encourage you to check out some indie books. I review indie books on my newsletter if you want to know what's good and what's worth reading. And there's a couple of other great places that we can direct